church, right? Everyone should feel safe. Okay, I'll stop harping on about that. But there's a lot on that. How they implement these things is going to be, we wait to know and when the government responds. But there's a whole lot of stuff on it online you can look at should you need bedtime reading. Okay? Right, so some recommendations for faith-based organizations in summary, we said there's a lot of them, is that ensuring that your governance understands the expectations from the community, from a legislative perspective. And this is not about saying that the government is coming to take over and tell us what to do, but it's about understanding that there are some standards of how people see how a church should operate, right? And what measures they should be looking into. Leaders are trained to prevent and respond to abuse, not this two people in a room and deciding it didn't happen and therefore carry on. We need processes, safeguarding, oversight and monitoring, supervision of people coming into ministry, whether pastoral or the ministries that you do in your various churches.
Do you want to hear my quick audit of Royal Oak? We were here a little bit earlier and someone showed me around. You've got this beautiful church, it really is. That back section where all the Sabbath school rooms are, it's amazing. High marks, like windows on every room, there's a lot of visibility. All the rooms are locked when they're not in use. It's fantastic. So big tick. You guys are doing some really good stuff with that. And that's really what it's about, is about how do we manage the environment. Take away the areas where abuse could happen. You know, there's dark areas that aren't watched. You know where people are. If the kids have a spot where they all play, and you agree with that, make sure that they're safe. And but that back area with the atrium and all those rooms, they were all locked, and I was like, wow. And the windows, you don't see churches designed that way. It's purpose built. It's really good.
Yeah. We'll talk through what that means for those churches that can't just get a new building. That is specific. They have older buildings and things are trickier, but we'll get there. Conflicts of interest need to be managed. We're a very tightly knitted church. Everybody knows everybody sometimes, and that also has an effect on how we respond to allegations or concerns. And so we need to notice that it can be a weakness, a strength again. We're connected, but in that connecting, we can also have issues in terms of how we respond because of those connections, and that is a real one. So they're suggesting we need to have systems to manage that, training for everyone who's involved in ministry. Goes on to talk about ensuring that your training aligns with your organizational policies. You will see that as we talk through the policies that AdSafe has prepared on behalf of the church as a whole. Barriers to disclosure actively reduced, one of them being conflicts and people just not knowing what to do, or who to go to, who to speak to about things. We need to break those barriers so that we don't allow this culture of, can I say unsafety? Can I say that?
We'll allow it.
We'll allow it. And safety to rule our churches and our spaces. So, and having, this is a really good one, clear and effective complaint handling processes. You know how they said that the weaknesses were that people just decide, oh, no, that can't be right. I know that person since they were in their Pampers, they didn't do that. And that's the process. We need a process that's robust and it gives people options where there could be potential challenges. Are we done with that one?
Tick.
Thank you. Okay. So number 3, because we're moving swiftly on this, aren't we? Who is AdSafe? Do you guys know what we do at AdSafe? Well, here we go.
Thanks for your honesty, because look, we get, it seems like a little bit of, it's not secret. And one thing that we like to point out is because people understand AdSafe, but all we do is manage and operate and help promote and implement the child protection policies of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in the South Pacific Division. So these aren't AdSafe policies. This training, we call it AdSafe training, but really we're training you in how to work within the child protection policies of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
All right, so we're going to play video.
Not rebranding, but we found that there is this perception that AdSafe does this, the church is here, and so I find that really helps clarify some things.
All right, so here's a video, and then I've got a trick question. Maybe not. We'll see. Oh, where's my sound? Where is my sound? Where's the man? That's a good question. Okay, I mean, I can talk around this video and then we just need to fix it for the others. I can't. Restart, okay. Yeah, no sound yet.
Oh, wait.
I'll wait. Hands off, Sylvia.
Pause it.
He says leave it. Okay, I will talk around this one because I can, and then some of the others I probably need the videos, so I'll keep going. Beautiful. Okay.
We could skip ahead and then come back to the video so that.
Yeah, okay. So what we were going to tell you in that video is that there are three main teams within AdSafe. And you've got two people belonging to two of those teams. So I'm the safeguarding team, which I'll tell you later why I think it's a particularly special team. Jamie, you start your team. Tell them.
Yeah, so I work with the risk management investigations team. So we're one of the response teams. So we respond to people that present risks, child protection risks to churches. So either history of sexual offending against children or new allegations against children, against them for sexual abuse of children. And our scope is sexual and physical abuse of children and vulnerable adults. There's different layers of risk that comes with each of those items in our scope. But essentially, we will work with churches to address those particular issues. We have another team who works with survivors, and they will add support and give support to them.
So that's the two response teams, Survivor Services and Risk Management Team. And the A team, I call it the A team because we are, is the safeguarding team. And
A team.
The A team, our role is to promote awareness and prevention strategies for churches. So the reason why we are the A team, he's in denial about that, is because we want Jamie unemployed. Right, so if we can work with churches and make churches and all our entity spaces involving kids and vulnerable adults safe, then he doesn't have anything to respond to.
Jamie, are you finding that things are increasing? As you get more awareness?
Yeah, that's a good question. Look, we still get a lot of allegations, but no, I don't think it's increasing in terms of, I think what happens is sometimes things people have done in the past becomes known, and so it's not necessarily new. There's still new events that happen, but in terms of, I think we've kind of leveled out a little bit there, but we still do get new matters coming through, and there's all sorts of things that will require response. Even sometimes people in prison might connect with the church in prison, and they come out and they go, hey, can I join a church? And I will assess if that's doable. Sometimes it isn't, but we can work through that. We have successfully found someone in a church, and that church, they tried, they love him. They really appreciate him at their church, and they manage that risk. And yeah. So Australia and New Zealand. So there's two on my team. So we don't go into the islands. We're always moving forward. We want the islands to increase in how they manage protection, but there's some cultural ways that they need to do it. So it'll be a very different model. It'll be slightly different. There's some very high needs there, but that's right. We're Australia and New Zealand for the moment. Let's see.
How do Australia and New Zealand compare to what's going on the other side of the world in our churches?
Yeah, so I don't know how they look, I know North America has responses, but it's probably more handled church by church, whereas we have a unified approach, and that's important, especially because people move around churches, and if there's a different approach, and you'd go, someone with ill intentions will just find the church with the so it's good that people realise we have a unified approach here, but we try to be fair. We manage things, and we'll talk a little bit how that response works later on, but unfortunately we are finding a lot more instances of peer-on-peer abuse. And it may be just because it's being addressed more. I don't think maybe it's always been there, but now it's being reported more. So, What? Sorry?
Yeah.
It is sad, yeah, because, you think we're a church, look, that people should be, because church deals with broken people and wants to restore people, and a big part of that, sexual immorality, is one of the things that God wants to fix in us, but unfortunately it's still present. Yeah. No, so I won't say I have the final say. What I do is I'll assess the risk. Then if a church is willing to work and implement measures, if it's suitable, and if they're willing to do that, because we can't tell churches what to do. We make recommendations, we guide churches, we make sure that they're protected, the kids are protected, even the person that has offended, because they need to be protected from from allegations, because you can imagine if people become aware that someone has that kind of history, that everything they do will be wrong. People they become extra careful, and and so we want to make sure there's privacy in place, and and that everything is addressed there. But I think it's a social problem, and it's still there in our church. No, our pleasure.
Activity, we think about
You know what I could do?
kids and vulnerable adults, and ensure that we have something in place. So just having that culture.
Can you hear that?
It's not a taboo topic, and we've also published a lot of accompanying resources to that to make it easy for churches to put safe things in place, checklists, risk mitigation guidelines, and so on.
We could skip the video.
Yeah, that's okay.
Let's skip the video.
Yeah, so is that all we need to say on that one?
Yeah. We'll skip
We'll
that
come
one.
back.
AdSafe is a service.
Oh, there was the sound.
There it is. So
For all
kinda-
that work and running around, maybe we
No,
should...
look, we have other videos. That's
We
what
have
need to
other
get it fixed.
videos?
Okay, so,
Thank you.
all right.
You should have seen them running around. I was like, wow, these guys are onto it.
We'll
It's
leave this
good.
one for now, though.
Yeah, we have a couple more
AdSafe
videos.
is a service
We'll
of the
move on.
Seventh-day
We'll
Adventist
explain.
Church. We provide a
Thank
service
you.
for all of the different entities of
Am I
the
still
church
in
across the
charge of
South
these
Pacific
slides? No,
Division.
No.
AdSafe's vision is to build a safe Adventist community where abuse has no place.
Subsequent to the Royal Commission, it was really evident that churches are particularly vulnerable to increased chances of children and vulnerable people being negatively impacted.
AdSafe is here to serve the church. Think of AdSafe as your go-to resource for safeguarding support. If you have a question, a concern, need clarification, we encourage you to reach out. You can call us, send us an email, or go to our website for resources and information. There's no such thing as a silly question when it comes to safeguarding. If you're unsure about something, please contact us. We're here to help.
We've developed quality processes for responding to disclosures of abuse and managing those who have been abused in a really trauma-informed and compassionate way.
While there is some legislative requirements, we have different teams here doing different things, and ultimately our goal is the protection of children and young people and vulnerable people as well.
I love working with survivors. They are the most resilient, strong group of people I think that I have ever worked with.
At AdSafe, training is one of the most important things we do. Of course, supporting survivors of abuse is essential, and strong processes for risk management and responding to allegations are critical. so that we can meet our biblical, legal and regulatory responsibilities. But responding after abuse has occurred is like sending an ambulance to the bottom of the cliff after someone has fallen. Our safeguarding and awareness training aims to build a safeguarding fence at the top of the cliff so that nobody falls. Prevention is purposeful. It's why equipping employees, pastors, volunteers and members with knowledge and awareness needed to create safe environments where people can grow and thrive and deepen their relationship with Jesus in a safe and caring community is vitally important.
We receive lots of different allegations, and it's just really important that they're investigated thoroughly.
If it was part of our culture, just to be aware, so we're not being risk averse, we're being risk aware, and if you can manage the environment so that it's hostile to offending, then offending won't happen.
So as we think about a program or activity, we think about safety for our kids and vulnerable adults and ensure that we have something in place. So just having that culture where it's not a taboo topic.
And we've also published a lot of accompanying resources to that to make it easy for churches to put safe things in place, checklists, risk mitigation guidelines and so on.
The journey of survivors is a really difficult journey, but they certainly provide that opportunity for the healing to occur.
We get new disclosures every week, and we really want to be able to help change churches so that at least on our watch, those things aren't happening.
I would love for the church to be a forerunner in this area, and we have to become trauma informed. We have to take up opportunities to educate ourselves.
What I'd love to see would be a church community that had their eyes open wide. By making it front and centre, it makes it very difficult for it to continue to occur.
Child protection is really everyone's responsibility. It's really fulfilling working with a bunch of other professionals who are passionate about protecting children and vulnerable adults. We really are about working with and supporting and trying to drive cultural change.
I feel happy that I'm part of helping to change a culture within our churches and our entities in all the activities that they do to encourage that safe culture.
Thank you for the role you have in supporting a thriving church where abuse has no place and healing begins.
Well, we got there in the end, and some people have aged better than others with the videos.
Oh, thanks, thank you,
But
Sylvia.
we won't get into specifics on that, shall we? Have you seen the hair change? Very good. All right, we talked about that. Now we're going to do, yes, this is the A team.
18, it's just 18.
Anyway, we'll keep moving. We are very small in number, but we are mighty. Remember that, right? With God on our side, nothing is impossible. All right. I do tend to get a little bit excited in this thing, so do excuse my enthusiasm. Right, part 4, recognizing abuse. Is this your part? All right, I'll do it, fine. You do the next bit. It's important we define, I've got to do different things with different hands, and it's all going to be haywire. Okay, this looks great on the slides here. It just has gone a bit mad, but I'll explain it. As we go through, I think we sometimes get confusions about things, and we just need to have definitions about things. So a child, for the purpose of this training and AdSafe's work, is any person under 18 years of age. Now, there are nuances in this in certain states in Australia, and also between 16 and 17 and things like that. There are other bits, but generally, a child is anyone under the age of 18. So that's how the policy is presented. And then we have here our definition of vulnerable adult, and that's a person, a vulnerable adult is a person who is over the age of 18 who at the time of the alleged abuse was or may have been unable to take care of themselves or unable to protect themselves from significant harm, exploitation or abuse due to a pre-existing psychological, mental and or physical impairment. It's a loaded one, okay? Because there's variety in this, and so it's usually based on the issue at hand and who the individual is and what that impairment is. So until something is brought in and assessed by the team, we have to establish whether it's within our scope, like we tried to explain earlier, physical or sexual abuse, or not, because it's important that AdSafe stays in scope as things currently as currently sit at the moment. There might be reviews in the future, but that's how it sits.
Yeah, and that means, look, anything that you're unsure of, you can call us. You can call us. If it's coming from the congregation and it's not about a pastor, we will usually bring your pastor into that conversation so they're aware as well. But we can also balance those sensitivities if needed. But generally, you can call us if you're unsure about something, and if it's not in our scope, we can still help you, point you in the right direction so that you can get the right support for those issues that don't fall into our scope.
All right, moving on. Types of abuse. There are various types of abuse, and my colouring has changed, but the first two, the physical and sexual abuse, are the ones that we've said are in AdSafe scope, yes? So physical and sexual abuse of a minor or vulnerable adult by someone in a role in one of our entities or organisations. Right, Jamie? All right. Now, we've also explained earlier that child-on-child sexual abuse also falls into the sexual abuse category. Okay? And any ideas why that could be on the increase? We've talked about a trend of child-on-child abuse increasing. Any thoughts on why? What could be? Social media and technology. Absolute nuisance. They're great for some things, and other times they're not. They're more problems than it's. And I think we'll hint on what we need to do as churches. We can't sit here all night, as I said, and go through each of these. But it's understanding how, knowing the environment we're operating now, what do we need to mitigate, and as we allow for engagement and interactions in our spaces. All right, that's the risk mitigation part. So,
ironically, in Australia, we've banned social media for people under 16. So I don't know if you knew that. But instead, now the media is latching on that kids are out in the streets. So you can't win always there. But either way, you know, kids sometimes will get into trouble, and especially without guidance. So, yeah, it's a problem.
yeah, just a little quick definition on physical. Sometimes, I don't know if you all know the types of abuse. Do you know them? Okay, so I'll just give you a quick definition. There's a lot to each one, but I don't want to bombard you with detail, okay? So physical abuse is the non-accidental injury of a child, the inadvertent result of physical punishment or physically aggressive treatment of a child or vulnerable adult, okay? So it's pretty detailed. There are examples in New Zealand, how you define it. So it's acts that cause or attempts to cause physical injury or harm, things like hitting, slapping, punching, kicking, choking, strangulation, burning, restraining, or use of weapons. So just think about how that could occur in church or church activities. Yeah? Sexual abuse is any act of a sexual nature upon or with a child for the sexual gratification of the perpetrator or third party, including anyone allowed to or who allows it or encourages it. And that has all kinds of definitions, but there's also the stuff about the materials that people use to distribute and so on and so forth in certain jurisdictions. So besides sexual assault, rape, coercion, intersexual activity, and reproductive coercion. So there's a big spectrum of this, and so that's so the two in bold at the top are within our scope, as we said. Psychological neglect is technically not within our scope, but although we know it's a type of abuse, what tends to happen is that when you do have physical or sexual abuse, you tend to also have psychological and neglect attached to those claims, in which case, if you receive a matter like that, it will be addressed in both of them, all of them will be addressed. However, if it's just not just, I'm not minimizing it, if it's a claim or matter that's purely psychological harm or neglect, it probably might not be in our scope, and it needs to be looked at in terms of how we can support, refer to other services within the current scope of our work. Are we all good with that? There's a finger.
It is. It's not in our scope. And look, churches still are equipped to deal with the things that are happening in their community. There's things here that come with extra legal needs and responsibilities, and that's not to minimise that verbal abuse can be harmful, but we have to keep in our scope. We're already inundated with what we've got. Yeah.
And there are services that deal with those outside of AdSafe within the communities. So that's who takes care of some of the other ones. Exposure to family violence is an interesting one in that you would think technically it's not in our scope. However, if the perpetrator is someone in a role, a key role, leadership or child leader in our churches, there might be a question of suitability for that role if they're portraying those behaviours in their own life, for example. So there's it's not an exact science, but there has to be some way of identifying and assessing each of these things and their impacts in our spaces.
Yeah, so some of these things the conference might address from their employment perspective, and we can support them, but we also make sure that it's understood we're within our scope.
With the peer-on-peer stuff, I guess a note to have in mind is that there is sexual behaviours that are age appropriate, and there are some that are not. Okay, and there is a process or there is criteria for working that out, and those that are not are the ones that need to be responded to if they're not developmentally correct. Yes. So do you understand what I'm saying by that? There are little things that kids do of that nature, but there are things that take it outside of the boundaries of normal development. Thank you, lady in red. Very good. So yes, and that's the stuff that and particularly when we have pathfinders and adventurers, we need to manage these things or respond to them I try to minimize them within our spaces. Yes.
Yeah, I can help you understand that. So a little child might lift up their shirt because they're just fidgety, and do things like that. But if they're older, that wouldn't be appropriate. And while it's not, we sort of try and help that child understand what the right behaviour is in public. But sometimes it could include things that might be just exploring or because they're still understanding things, and so there's an understanding. There's a few different tools that people use, but we're not encouraging that. But we also understand that given their age, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're trying to be offensive. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're talking about that whole range. Yeah.
And that's why there are different levels of what's normal behaviour for the different developments within that.
So there's a few tools that are out there. One of them, if you wanted to look into it in your own time, because we don't discuss it, it's called a traffic light system, where you go, all right, for where your age group, there's a green light going, okay, this, while it might not be the best behaviour, it's sort of within the category of things that kids are still discovering and learning. And then there's orange, where you go, this behaviour seems a little bit more, needs a bit more attention. And then there's red light, where you say that child is actually crossing really strong lines. And we wouldn't treat that as that child needing punishment, but there needs to be extra support. That child needs to get some guidance, like around those behaviours, which could include assaulting another child, and that's where you go, well, this is unacceptable, and needs to be addressed and managed sensitively based on their age. But then as you get to teenagers, you have teenagers that, if they're abusing children sexually, it's like this is, the criminal scheme comes into that, but we also, we try to address things sensitively and proportionately, yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Did that?
Not really,
Oh, okay.
Just in summary, look at it as a traffic light system. Green is safe, it's within the normal ages, so some little boys like to show their bottoms, right? Or they do. And it's not...
That's under 5, so very young children?
Yes, so not to 5, whatever, they do that.
Then when they're 10, if they're still doing that, you go, hey, wait a second, this is...
That might be orange.
You should know better than that,
right.
Based on
and you don't do that at 16 or 17. Age. So it's just depending on the age. Mm. Yeah.
I just want to, let's say there was a situation where someone that was 17 did, how we support?
Yeah, so that's where you would get support. If a 17-year-old is engaging in especially criminal abuse, like sexual abuse and then we're going to talk about those. That we will talk about that, but essentially, as you would in any other setting, you might need to call the police, and you don't need to address some things. You need to get the right people, and we're going to look through a little bit more of that a bit later on. Yeah.
All right, good question.
That's good. It's important to understand, so we want to make sure.
Grooming one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Take the pic, Mike. Thank you.
So abuse happens. Oh, she's so short. Wait.
She's so short. Good things come in small packages, right?
Okay. So grooming. So abuse happens, but what facilitates it? And often someone will need to engage in abuse. They have to find an inroad to that. They need to find a way to do that. Now, one of the key ways that's been understood that people use is called grooming. Has anyone not heard this term before? Okay, that's good. So, so we have a little video as well, and this video explains. Now, I'm sorry, it's from Australia. I hope that's not offensive. From the Western Island. So. We'll play this little video, and it really does a good job of explaining how grooming works, what it is, and then I'll break it down into how it's being used.
Grooming is the manipulation of children in physical spaces like a sports ground, religious setting, classroom or performance space, and in online environments such as social media, email and text. Grooming is a process of manipulation that prepares a child to be abused and tests their likely response. Perpetrators work to convince the child not to say anything. While children are most likely to be groomed, abusers will also target protective adults, families, and even entire organizations in order to get unsupervised access to a child or young person. When grooming a child, abusers seek to build a sense of trust, despite intending to later betray this trust. They will test the child's ability to keep secrets and may use threats of violence against them or people they love. They may contact the child on their personal device, where their conversations are less likely to be monitored. Engaging the child in private messaging can lead to the adult sharing inappropriate conversations, photos, or videos. They may give the child gifts or preferential treatment to establish what appears to the child to be a special relationship. They may encourage the child to meet with them outside the organization or in areas where they can't be seen. Grooming can also include testing the child's tolerance for inappropriate touching, with the intention of normalizing this kind of contact. They may try to isolate the child from their peers or the caring adults in the child's life, so they feel dependent on the abuser. They may encourage breaking rules or blame the child for their inappropriate actions, so the child becomes reluctant to tell anyone what they have been doing. This can include supplying cigarettes, alcohol, or pornographic material in an attempt to reduce the child's inhibitions to the abuse. The intention is always the same: to remove the child from the supervision of caring or protective adults and make them less likely to report abuse. This testing and manipulating can extend to their adult colleagues. Perpetrators want to know how much they can get away with. They may appear to be a nice or caring person who goes that extra mile. Often, this is so there's less chance their illegal activities will be uncovered. They may try and convince a parent or carer that they are vital to the child's success. They may use this as motivation to encourage the parent to provide unsupervised access or to interact with the child in ways that would not normally be considered appropriate. They may encourage the parent to allow the child to stay overnight with them or receive extra training, rehearsals, or remedial treatment without adult supervision. Perpetrators may work to build the trust of other adults so that they can convince the child that even if they're told, no one would believe them. Reducing opportunities for grooming starts with your organisation's culture. How do you ensure that everyone, including employees, volunteers, parents, children and young people, know what appropriate behaviour looks like? What rules are in place? Does everyone in your organisation know who to report it to if they witness inappropriate behaviour? Having a clear code of conduct, a child safe policy, and trained people who know how to respond to and report incidents, even if they appear insignificant, will help you create a culture where abuse is minimised and children are valued.
So there's a lot in there, but it really breaks down how this operates. Now, in the 90s, yeah, I'm that old. In the 90s, there was this big push for understanding body language. Yeah, everyone was talking about body language. And all of a sudden, everyone was an expert. If you had your arms crossed, you had something to hide. Not pointing anyone out, right? But the thing is, it's easy to misunderstand. And grooming's similar in the sense that it's not just one thing someone has done. And look, sometimes we'll get calls at AdSafe where somebody says, "Hey, I saw this person," and they were looking at a child. Now, that on its own may mean nothing. That child may just be in their eyesight, in their line of sight. But it's a pattern of behaviour. So it's really important to understand that, especially because these same behaviours they're used against you as well as protectors in your church and protectors of children to get past your guards so that they can get access to a child. And the way they do this, essentially, it's a misuse of communication and your good graces, and it's manipulating you to be able to get past you and access to the child. And so it's really important to understand how this works. So I want to break it down a little bit further. So one of the key of a grooming approach is that someone is they've targeted a victim. So that they've already targeted that victim and they're trying to find their way through those protections towards that child. And they might do this, they might single out someone who's shy or isolated. Maybe they have, the parents aren't involved as much because of extra work or stress. And so they will focus on these children and position themselves as someone that can be helpful to that child. And in the context of a church, this can mean like a spiritual mentor or someone. They can misuse our religious language and approaches so that they can access a child. So the flag here is, what would you notice that maybe someone is starting to target a child? And I think a key indicator of that stage would be an adult that's consistently singling out one child over the others. So it's not just good, nice behaviour towards children because they're just being friendly. They're singling out and focusing on one child. Now that on its own may just be that for some reason that child, we have to weigh this up. Maybe that child there was a reason for that, but it's more likely you start to at least be aware and say, well, what's happening here? And this is what we want to be able to do here as well, is not create a suspicious environment where everyone's looking over their shoulder at everyone else, but being aware of how these things operate so that when you see stuff that you go, wait a second, what's happening here? And so one of my favourite Bible verses in this field is it's Matthew 10:16. It says, I send you out amongst wolves. You should be as wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And so we need to be wise. And that means it's not about being mistrustful, but it's saying, hey, wait a second, what am I seeing here? And being, actually stopping yourself and questioning, saying, wait, is this appropriate? And not because we're looking for suspicion, but we go, that normally wouldn't happen. So they've found a target, then they might start to gain that child or the caregiver's trust. So they start to always be available, almost it's excessively being available, especially with children, and especially if it can be a way to reach that the child that they've targeted. And often presenting themselves as morally upright, beyond question, offering to help in especially with parents and struggling parents with kids. That may be an aspect of it. Offering transport or tutoring and childcare arrangements to give you a break and just to be helpful, but it's excessive. And so they're really trying to create a sense of trust around them without oversight and without accountability. So there's another indicator you want to look for, is this person accountable in offering these things? If a person is offering lifts with other adults, because they're, hey, we're going that way, and they've arranged it so they're not alone, you go, okay, well, that makes more sense. There's accountability there. But it seems to be this person is trying to single this person out and offer these extra help, and without that accountability and oversight. So that's the flag you'd look out for there, or at least be aware of. And then they might need to fulfill a need. So giving gifts and money and treats or privileges not given to other children. Sometimes it may be that they're loose with their boundaries, and they might let kids drink or act in ways that other adults won't, so they've built trust. They might offer private prayer sessions and mentoring and counselling, again, without that oversight and accountability. If they're singling out a child, misusing religious language, that God has a special plan for you, and this person is the one to help them fulfill that. So there's a secrecy, and especially if it's being framed around religious language, that's a flag. You want to be aware of that. Now, once they've done this, they start to isolate that child more and more from the rest of their peers, being alone with them in locked rooms. That's why I mentioned, how your Sabbath schools rooms, it's awesome that you do that. We raise it with some churches, and they're sort of like, oh, but the windows on those rooms is excellent. It's really, really purpose-built. So locked rooms, car rides, camps, after-hours church access, helping, being available to parents. I can help with that. Encouraging a child to spend less time with their peers and more time involved in it may be under the guise of Bible studies or things like that, or church activities like being involved with a choir or music and special music lessons, to justify one-on-one time without accountability, without transparency, no other people around, and they've isolated that child. And then they will start to, if their intentions are, as we suspect, they will sexualize that relationship, and that means excessive physical contact. It's being framed as, like maybe where they're praying more, they're touching the child, they're getting that child used to that touch and physical closeness. They might discuss sexual topics under the guise of Bible teaching and moral guidance. Increasing physical closeness, testing reactions. Maybe if it's a sport element involved, there's opportunities there to have more physical contact, and that physical contact will become more increased. So the boundaries are crossed, but they're explained away by the activity that's being played, but they're familiarising it and making it just common and normal for that child. They're normalising that. And then, sadly, if they've gotten this far, they've probably already started to possibly, if this was their intention, if abuse has come into it, then they need to maintain control. And the way this happens is through reminding them, again, because we're in a church, they could frame it in a spiritual language, saying, God will, expects you to trust my authority, his spiritual authority. It could also include making threats to secure participation and secure silence. And so they control that. So basically, you can see there's a number of stages here, and it's not just one of these things. And I guess what we want to look out for is if someone's trying to make you, and I don't know, has anyone ever been ripped off? Has anyone ever been sold a a lemon of some kind. I bought something online once. I thought I was buying like an engraver, and I ended up with some fluffy earmuffs, and I was like, how did this happen, and, so it's hard because we're not looking for it. But now, because in a sense with the internet and things like this, usually more people are waking up. You get calls that you don't know and they're talking about money. You go, no, this is a scam, right? So you can just dismiss it. And really what we want to be able to do is we know those signs and those indicators, and we can go, hey, wait a second. We can be wise about it. And so we want to see, it's not single actions. It's not a single hug. It's not a single mentoring session, but it's repeated, repetitive, secret boundary crossing behaviour without accountability, without transparency, and it's targeting a child and removing them from that ability for you as a church and as protectors of children to see what's happening. So Sylvia likes to talk about these ones. We're so sorry, our pretty slides are all, yeah, it's all right.
Yeah. Do you want to do it?
You can do this.
Okay, have the pink back. So how the process or stages that Jamie explained, what are some things we can do to prevent that progressing to the worst part? So we got here as parents, what can we do? One of those is teaching your kids the proper names of their body parts. Because what you would like to avoid is a scenario where that's that process that Jamie has explained. A child has been taught, for example, that their genitalia is called teddy. And the child is telling you that they don't like it when, cousin John touches their teddy. And you have no concept of what that is all about. Yeah? And this is what happens. Those who are perpetrating this, I guess, they change things around to suit what their plan is, and we just need to educate our kids a bit on some basics. This is physiology, and so that they know that they can say, this is what's happening, and therefore you know how to respond and or ensure that you're listening when they speak the right way, yeah? Because they can tell you, they're telling me it's called this, but I know you've told me it's called this, for example, right? Simple, but quite effective. Teach kids what kind of touch is and isn't appropriate. If we don't, as we've seen in that cycle that Jamie has explained, someone else is going to teach them what that appropriate conduct is or touch is. So it's about, and we'll talk about the code of conduct because it helps to define what is okay and what isn't okay, especially for those in our roles. And I suppose it's relevant to all those in our community to know what is okay and what isn't as we engage together and grow in Christ together in the same spaces. Teach kids that they can say no. This is about empowering them and giving them allowing them to use their voice. If we know that you can't touch me in certain places and someone touched me in certain places, I need to be able to say, don't do that, I don't like it, and tell an adult, for example. And that's the next part about telling them what to do, which is to speak up to someone that's safe or they consider safe about what's happening so something can be done about it to stop it happening. So, and finally is letting kids know who are safe adults. The challenge with grooming is that if we've been groomed in the church by a particular charismatic individual and that person is interfering with our kids, but we think they're the best thing since sliced bread. Have you heard that term? I don't even know what that means. Best thing since sliced bread, so that they can do no wrong, they're righteous, etc. We might be inadvertently sending our kids to those people that are causing harm to them. What I think is the alternative question is to your child saying, who would you say are safe adults? So if you had something embarrassing or uncomfortable, who would you talk to? Tell me 5 people. Because hopefully out of those 5, if that child went from 1 to 2 to 3 and they did nothing, hopefully 4 or 5 would do something about it. Yeah? So it's just getting the kids to think about safety, their personal safety, and what to do if that safety was ever challenged or compromised. So my kids, my kids. I've got a 9-year-old and 11-year-old. They told me one of their favorite teachers, they told me or dad, and a couple of people from church that they trust. But yeah, so it's just getting, and look, the key about this little bit of education, it seems minutiae, but it's actually pretty deep, because what you teach them in that context equips them outside. So even when they're at school or when they go to see a nurse, please don't let your kids go see a nurse or a doctor on their own, things like that. They know what's okay and what isn't. And ordinarily there should be a chaperone as the parent or someone in the room. So it's just all these things that we don't necessarily automatically talk about, but are really crucial to people's personal safety. Yeah? All good? Excellent. So as a church, what can we do? We'll talk a bit more about this, but having good processes and practices around adults interacting with children that are not their own alone.
Code of conduct.
Code of conduct. And this is why I talked about at the start, how everyone needs to do that when they're taking up certain roles. It's just, we all have different backgrounds and experiences, and we might think culturally some things are okay for our culture and some things are not, and it gets very complicated. But in church, when we're operating and working together, what is the standard? And that's what the code of conduct is. Okay, so there's no misunderstandings of things. Making children's areas visible, which Jamie has talked about. And if you have you're challenged by that because of the structure of your church and the age, what other things can you think about to manage those areas which might not be so visible, to reduce any risk of untoward things happening?
For example, for some is everyone here from Royal Oak? No.
Yes.
So in some different church settings, for instance, let's say you have 2 adults in a class, but one person can't come. You could move the class where it's visible. So, in the corner of the sanctuary, maybe there's other classes going on, but now it's visible so that, they can still go on, but you found a workaround for that one event. Yeah. That, for example, if you can't lock Sabbath scores, well, I think we should probably get that fixed, but maybe there's a way you monitor those areas. Find ways to fill those gaps and meet those needs, so that you're removing the spaces where this can happen and managing that. That's just some quick examples.
Yeah, letting children and young people know that they're accepted, valued, and believed. If you don't, as a community, as a church, a perpetrator will give them, as we've seen in those stages of grooming, they will give that child that value and that acceptance, and that person then becomes the most important thing in their lives, sometimes even beyond their own families. And that's when you have entangled situations. Your children, your young people, your communities, your visitors, everyone should know who they can speak to if they had a safeguarding concern at your churches. So that might be through posters, that might be through slides that you put on your screens, between programs to say, this is the pastor, this is the AdSafe compliant assistant, this is one of our head elders or deaconesses that you can go to if there was a concern. You just need to, it just needs to be part of who you are. Transparency and safeguarding should be part of who we are. Alrighty, moving on, because we can. Is this me again? Oh, okay. I was hoping for a sit down, but maybe not yet. So part 5, what's the church's safeguarding framework? We mentioned before that AdSafe has worked on a number of policies and guidelines on behalf of the church, on behalf of the Seventh Adventist Church, particularly Australia and New Zealand, because of the other element that needs to be worked through. And there is a framework. We as a church have acknowledged that we need to put some things in place to safeguard our environments, because we've seen that we are quite vulnerable to being exploited in our spaces. And I'll just quickly run through that so you know, because that's one of the reasons why you're here tonight, presumably. All right? So, every volunteer in a child-related role or leadership role needs to satisfy these items. One is completing the training, which you are doing tonight. Very good. That training, as I said, is for 3 years, lasts for 3 years, and it gets updated, and there could be massive changes in legislation or practice. We might need to get to you guys, and we'll let you know how that goes. But generally, it's every 3 years. Okay? You need to read and sign a code of conduct. You've heard us talk about codes of conduct and about setting the boundaries on behavior. You'd be surprised how many boundaries are breached on a regular basis. And so it's about when people are coming to these roles of leadership or roles where they have regular and or unsupervised contact with kids, that we're clear on the expectations. Okay? There's screening, and screening is twofold. In New Zealand, you have the police vetting for your processes. You all know that? Yes, and you do that through your pastor, your AdSafe compliant assistants, and the conference to sort that process out as it currently stands. The second part of that is screening against a database of persons of concern for the church, which is managed by AdSafe. And that is a part of your nom-com process. So when a church is going through nom-com or looking at getting through nom-com, there are certain things that they should be communicating to the wider church to say, church, we're going to start thinking about our nom-com process and looking at nominating for roles and so on. We just need to remind you all that there are roles that we are that relate to leadership or child leadership, and these are the requirements for those roles, as exhibited here on the screen. If you do not, and one of those is screening your name against the church's database of persons of concern. If you do not wish to be screened, they need to have the opt-out. If you do not wish to be screened against that database, you need to tell the pastor. Okay? We're being transparent here. We're not doing anything in secret. We're saying that we have a database of persons concerned, and it wouldn't be right if we have that and there's concerns about someone and we just put them in a role that gives them access to kids because we haven't done some due diligence. Okay? There's a lot more behind that, but we could be here all night. Okay? Reference checks. It's about, especially when someone is new to a role or to a church, if you don't know them, it really would be good to have an idea about where they were and if where they were working, whether it's a church role or not, if there are any concerns with them working with kids. Yeah? Because you have no background otherwise. And finally, waiting periods. That one is not an AdSafe one, it's in the church manual. Do you know what they are? Right. So what it says, yeah, spot on. It says here that if you are newly baptized or transferring, there's a 6 months waiting period before you can take up certain roles. And also is 12 months for a non-member volunteer. Again, it's because you don't know them. And you can't just say, here we go, you lead the children's Sabbath school and our Pathfinder camp happening in 2 months. You can't do that. Because we're saying we're a child-safe organization, right? And we have a standard of how we assess suitability for these roles because we want to protect our children and vulnerable adults, so we need to follow process.
And it happens. It happens
a lot.
All the time where someone may be known to a church for safeguarding risks and then they disappear and then we're like, oh, where did they go? And we don't know. And then we find out that 2 months later, they're at another church, and that church has been struggling, and they're a youth leader. And we're like, how did that happen so quickly? If they keep to the church manual, we could avoid that. If they had done their screening, especially through AdSafe, they would, so we of all the matters that we have a record of that, and so they can check through these processes and ensure that there's nothing known to us, there's nothing known through the police vetting. The problem with all of these checks is you don't rely on them 100% because you also have what you're witnessing. Some of these behaviours that we talked about before with grooming, you might be seeing that. That doesn't mean that there's an indicator. And you might say, I'm not sure if this person is really strong on boundaries and understands the importance of that. So that would probably be a better indicator than even these checks. The police vetting is every 2 years, 3 years? 3 years. You could be checked by the police 1 week and arrested the next week, and it won't show up because you don't need to be checked again for 3 years. So you don't rely on them 100%, but they're still important.
Yeah, it's part of the whole network of.
Can I just clarify the reference checks for us? So if we've got somebody new to the church,
or new to a role, yeah.
in the role,
Or you might just, if I can tell you I went to Croydon SDA Church for 30 years of my life in the UK, and you want me to be a youth leader, you can contact Croydon
Talk to the
SDA Church.
clerk.
Talk to
Clerk
the,
will usually be on it.
we do it in normal employment. For some reason, we like to skip it for these sort of things.
Saying times 3, I
It's
think
a guide.
if you know, you ring that church and they say, well, they were here for a year, and you find out where they were before that, because maybe that wasn't enough time for them to know.
That's right.
So, just do some extra diligence and just make sure you've got, some indicators there.
Yes, you had a point?
Oh, thanks.
How do I apply for the screening, the AdSafe screening? Please check me, yes, but how do I?
So that would happen, the church would, once they have that list before the first reading, they send it through to us and we can give
So
it back.
the pastor or the
Same
AdSafe
day.
compliant assistant?
So it's not done as part of this training?
No,
No.
because that's a check on the database. We don't. It's not done here. It's done before you go into a role. It has to be done before you go into a role.
Yeah, and the reason is because, as I said, we've had so many cases of people that disappeared, they're unsuitable, they show up in another church and they're nominated very quickly sometimes for roles, they've become an elder. People that were on a fellowship agreement, we'll discuss that a bit later on. That means that they've got criminal offences for offending. They've left a church, and then we find out that another church has made them an elder or put them in a role with youth. And sometimes without any of it, they've just superseded all of this.
Yeah.
Because of a small church, they're going, oh, this is good. This man maybe have a connection, maybe chief connections. That's one that often makes some churches fast track them into becoming an elder because of their family history and family name. And so it just we can have that extra check and close that gap.
Yes, Pastor.
Would drunk driving disqualify someone from being adventurous or pathfinders?
So no, we're looking at child protection risks, but again, you as a church board might decide that's unsuitable, because you might say, well, maybe it just recently happened, or you sort of think, well, you've got a member who's drinking, so you'd say, well, is this someone that we put in a role, So you as a board can decide that. The things that we're interested in here is, do they have flags for child protection risks?
That will fall under your risk assessment for work health and safety. So if this person is still struggling with this, because no one becomes an angel by coming into church, right? No. But then he wants to drive the bus, but everyone has a whiff of alcohol in his breath. So and that is common knowledge. You might not want them necessarily, if that tends to be the state they're in, because everyone is still dealing with different issues, to be driving the bus to Pathfinder Camp with your kids in it. So it's about, that's risk managing in how you keep your kids safe in that aspect. So it could be relevant for other things.
Yeah.
To be honest, I'm finding it real hard to understand what's happening, only because I know Jesus to be a forgiver, and he loves everyone, and even those people that we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's real challenging to listen to these things and to also hear how common it is. Yeah. I find it real sad and struggling to understand.
So look, I believe 100% that Jesus transforms lives, 100%. But we also have responsibilities, and as Jesus said, because we're amongst wolves, we need to be wise as serpents. And when we, and also the Bible says in Ezekiel, that if someone is succumb to wickedness, it uses that word, and you don't do anything to help redirect them, then actually some of that responsibility will fall on you. So we have a responsibility to make sure that suitable people, and this is why churches will Sometimes they won't select people for roles because they're just not suitable. Pastors sometimes lose their ordination as pastors because of divorce or reasons like that. This is just how we operate in protecting the reputation of the church, protecting children. And it's about, maybe some of these roles, those roles aren't about giving someone their redemption. Doesn't mean that you're suitable for a role because we're redeemed. And it's similar, if someone was embezzling large amounts of money, we wouldn't probably put them in financial roles.
I just wanted to also say thank you for giving me the understanding, because I do agree with you. We are amongst wolves, and we have to be as wise as a serpent and as harmless as doves. So thanks for the understanding.
No worries. What's your name? Junior. Thanks, Junior.
Okay, we're gonna sprint through. Thank you. Oh,
It's also, like for me personally, it's also protecting God.
Yeah.
Because it's all good for us to say, oh, God, and our journey with God, but we have to do our part to protect God as well.
Yeah. That's right. His name is on the line as well, and this is why in the public there's a lot of mistrust with churches now, because we've allowed this to go on and people have smirched God's name. Absolutely, it's a good point.
yeah, good point. And people have left church as a consequence.
Yeah.
Sorry, not everyone must work with children in our church, right? There are other roles where, so we don't, it's not like someone needs to be or has to be excluded because they've done something. It's just there are different roles where, you can exercise your gifts, but not here, because this is a risk area.
Yeah. Thank you. And look, I'll say my role, sometimes my role is to help facilitate people to be included, not excluded. And that means risk has been identified, and we try to work out how can that person still be part of this community, but where we manage those risks. So it's about including as much as we can, and that's the key there. But yeah, this comes up a lot where people think, well, there's other things that they can do. Absolutely.
All right, moving on, shall we? Very good questions, though. Really good dialogue.
Yeah.
We talked about the code of conduct. We have a lot of posters that you can utilize to explain the code of conduct and to all your community, your entire church. It's not just those in roles that need to understand the behaviors that are okay, also your churches. And also it reminds kids of what is okay and what isn't, and when something isn't, they can raise it. For example, one of the things highlighted on this, which you might able to see from where you are, is that only parents or carers can help kids with personal care. So if a child needs to go to the bathroom, I don't take your child to the bathroom, for example. It seems easy, but it's not always something that we stick to. It's just trying to set those boundaries about who does what for whom, and maintaining that. We know that we've talked about how there's an increase, a growing trend of children abusing children, and so we do have other resources you can use. We have Pathfinder Code of Conduct, and this is trying to address when Pathfinders can do things to each other which isn't okay, and we're trying to set an expectation for them before, particularly before they go to, when you can use document your registrations every year to remind Pathfinders of how we want to operate, how we want to engage when we operate as Pathfinder groups and peers, and also in there's other things in there. For example, ensuring that if you allocated to sleep in this section of the sleeping arrangements, that's where you sleep. You don't end up in people's tents uninvited and things like that. It's just maintaining boundaries so everybody can have their personal spaces and keep that maintained. So you can utilize that, and it's good also to obviously do it at registrations every year, but also before a high-risk activity, which is usually things that involve overnight stay, because you need to remind kids of the expectation. This document also involves a parent or carer reading and agreeing to what's been said. Everything is transparent. We're just saying this is how we would like to behave, and there might be consequences. The The thing at the bottom talks about consequences. If you're not going to abide with this, if there's a massive problem in the middle of the night, and those who are managing this say we have to separate these kids, the parent might get a call at 1 o'clock saying, please go and pick up your child. So it's about everyone being part of the conversation and understanding what's expected.
Yeah.
Okay?
And just biblically, in Eden, before we fell, God said, here's what you can do, here's what you can't do. And if you do that, this is what happens. So it's like we need to have clear guidelines, because then we understand what we're on.
Our website.
Website, yeah.
Yeah, and on the website, it's also on the AUC website. We have told your union and conference youth directors about it. It's about whether or not they engage with it and push it out to you. But you can ask them, and all these things are available on our website. We also have a young leaders code of conduct. We talked about that peer-on-peer thing, where you might say a 16-year-old is going to be some sort of leader, act as a leader for their own peers. And we have to clarify those boundaries for those young people so they know what the expectations are, and everyone is clear on that. Again, it's to help facilitate those conversations about what is okay and what isn't. And of course, a guardian is involved in that dialogue too. So there's things we just need to, before this stuff, there was no conversations on these issues. So no wonder these issues were quite rampant, and we've got to set the boundary somewhere. Yeah? You have a question?
So just to sort of help probably the situation, because conferences sometimes, these are the people that feels like, though they are really close, but it feels like they're miles away. But me as the regional pastor for Central East Auckland, I actually can help you with this information, because we worked with Jamie on a number of cases, and we have a good history of relationships. So, and here at Royal Local, we went through a lot of different things when it comes to AdSafe, because we're a big church. So I can help you and advise you, and actually help your pastor as well with providing all this information. So please feel free to reach out to me, and I can help with that.
Awesome, thank you.
All right. So we talked about those volunteers at the local level, but there's extra requirements. The same requirements we just talked about, the 5 items, also applies to board members. So the general volunteers, but also leadership, need to have the same requirements, okay? There are additional expectations of board members, because obviously they're making decisions every day about kids, so they need to have an understanding of how safeguarding operates. They also need to make sure that there's a leader, and most of the time conferences are the ones who appoint a pastor, but sometimes pastors are split between numerous churches and the pastor can't be everywhere, and they might have another person who steps in when the pastor's not there, maybe a head elder. AdSafe would need to know about that arrangement and be okay, and the conference to be okay with that, because if there was any issues that need to be managed, Jamie and his team would work with those leaders to ensure they know what's happening and how to work along the whole team. An AdSafe compliant assistant is the person who, do you know who that is in your church? Some of you? Are you the one, or you know who it is? You know who it is, okay. So this, we have suggested that because pastors are swamped and sometimes move quite a bit, to have someone who helps the pastor with the admin of police vetting, processing through those who need to do their trainings and codes of conduct. So they help with the admin. They're not the ones that take the disclosures of abuse. That's not their role, and they're not there to deal with any challenges in that space. That's the pastor, but that person helps the pastor with the admin. So we need to know who that person is at every church, and we try and reach out and connect, because we help them to do that effectively in their various jurisdictions, all the way from Sydney. We help them. We email them, we call them, we do Zoom trainings for them, we do all kinds of things to help them navigate safeguarding and what resources they can use at the local church in this. So boards need to tell us, okay? Boards need to also ensure that they prioritize child and vulnerable adult safety in their decision making. We've got to think about it like everything else. If we think about what we have to do to get insurance for a camp or abseiling, it's the same breath. You've got to think about, okay, how is everyone going to be safe at that in terms of personal safety? How are we going to get there? Who's going to drive them? Where they're going to sleep? All these sort of things. So it's part of that rather than an add-on.
Yeah, and when you think about it, like I mean, kids make up such a huge part of our church.
Yeah.
And for a long time, we just haven't considered these extra needs that they might have, and so, yeah, we need to consider that. We know the decisions about the carpet that we choose, and
Can take up time.
amazing carpet, by the way. I'm glad you pointed that out. I'm impressed with the two symbols there. It's very cool. But, we make these decisions as boards. It's like, of course we need to think about the needs of kids in special circumstances.
Yeah.
In all circumstances.
On all circumstances. The other things that the boards need to do is they need to work through the roles that are defined as child-related and need to meet those requirements we're talking about. There are some things in the policy that are set, so any role like children's Sabbath school, Pathfinder helpers, all those roles are clearly child-related. But you might have situations where, because all churches don't operate the same, would you believe that? Yeah, they don't. And so sometimes some of the things we recommend is that if you have an AV team or, what's the other one I'll give you example? Praise and worship teams where there are kids on the team as part of the team, they would not ordinarily be captured under the safeguarding requirements as child-related roles. However, if you do have kids as part of that team, it's recommended or suggested that the whole team meet the requirements of the adults, meet the requirements, so that everyone understands boundaries and how to engage with those, what's the standard to engage with those kids on that team. Do you see what I mean? Are you all with me still? You are nodding. This is good news. Okay, so what else? There's a lot people, like I said to you about the NOMCOM process, where the pastor notifies the church, we're going to go through NOMCOM, and for leadership or child-led roles, there's certain requirements that are part of church policy, and we also screen names against the church's database, and they say they need to agree to these things. They need to know that they can opt out of that screening before you give them the role. You can imagine if that's not done, and you screen after they're in the role, and you've done the second or whatever, how many readings you do, now you've got to step them down. And that can get, as I said, the tongues wagging. Everyone is like, why did you step them down? And then now you're in a bit of a pickle, right? It's better to do the screening beforehand, or they opt out of screening and therefore they can't take the role, than tackle a problem after the role. They should not be in a role until you've done the process. All right? I know that could be challenging because we need volunteers, but it's better to have no one in the role than to have someone who's not suitable for the role.
And one thing that some people have raised is, and this is just not a suggestion, but something maybe some churches need to think about, especially with the police vetting can be delayed, some of that. Doing it earlier, maybe step it back a month or so that you can get there before this happens.
Yeah.
So when they're appointed, it happens on time, but just do the committees a little bit earlier. That's just a suggestion. Some churches have raised that, or maybe we could do that. I thought, that might be a solution in those cases.
Yeah, the other couple of responsibilities for board members and leaders is that leaders would have to provide risk assessments to the church board when they're running or planning activities, and the church board needs to sign that off because they're saying we take on that risk. Now, I suppose we should also mention that it's the conference that carries the risk and not the church because of our structure, but that's why we need to work together to safeguard our spaces. But the board need to be involved in assessing, have we covered this? Have we looked at child and vulnerable adult safety in that risk assessment? And finally, the vetting process needs to also be done, and we just talked about that. And that hopefully might change and become more efficient, the process, when the Royal Commission's recommendations are being implemented into law. And the changes that need to happen to make it, because we know there are challenges.
Yeah, in Australia, the police, you can get a criminal history check through a whole bunch of different providers now online. And you can get them within an hour sometimes. So it's been streamlined in Australia, and I imagine it could happen that way over here as well.
Yeah.
So.
And I guess the other thing that we would like to see, that some states in Australia, they have a system where you connect the person's check onto your organisation, and if there's a change, you get updated. Whereas not everyone has it, which would be helpful. But everything, I suppose, has its time. All right.
Do you need a quick break?
I know we're a bit late.
Minutes? Yeah, let's do that, and then we can be back here.
Stretch.
I think we're making up. We've made some good time.
We're trying to be quick.
For
so
those
you've
of
got to
you
be
that were
quick
late,
back,
we were
right?
caught in traffic too. It was rough out there. Yeah.
Did you want a quick
Do you want
break?
a quick break?
I think we've talked there is. We'll do a quick break and then we'll start in a couple of minutes.
So the bathrooms are at the end of this corridor. You just turn left, and there are male and female bathrooms over there. Please.
moving on to part 6, responding.
Actually, before you
Before I
hit
do
that,
that.
I just because
In 2022, disasters wreaked havoc around the world, affecting the lives of millions. But thanks to you,
is show you it, and you can just tell me what you see and what your thoughts are on it. All right, and then I'll tell you a summary on that. Are you ready, Jamie? Where is Jamie? I've lost him.
The next image that we want to show, the
we
person
can hear
who
you,
drew
Jamie.
it, it's part of their personal experience, so we don't want to.
We can hear you. Are you got it under control, Pastor?
No, yeah, I just realised because you're streaming. Yeah. No, just that one. Yeah. Okay, good to go.
Am I good to go? Okay, here we go. What do you see? Except that I don't have control of the slides anymore. Pastor V. I'm not moving.
Okay, he's blocking that. So.
They can block it out later.
So we want to show it. We just don't want to stream it.
You can block it later. Oh, is it live streamed right now? Is it live streamed? There's people online?
No, I've explained that.
Yeah.
If people are just watching it streaming, it doesn't count.
No, it doesn't. Okay, we're good?
Okay.
I don't. No. Technology is so much fun, isn't it? Oh, here we go. Very good, Pastor and team. What do you see? Adults and child, okay. You clock the halos. Leadership, yeah, okay. Yeah. Anything else? Someone's been silenced? Maybe. Anything else? Perhaps, yeah.
Yeah, there's no mouths on the other guys, so they're not saying anything.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, or distressed or something, yes. A Bible, yes, a Bible or something, official or not, who knows? Yeah. Pointing fingers, what could that be, the pointing fingers? Accusation? Possibly, yeah. Shall I tell you what the survivor said? If you're exhausted? All right, pardon? It's the child's fault. She's being blamed. Yes, that's right. So the survivor says that the hands that are hidden didn't or couldn't do anything. The eyes to watch but no mouth to speak up for her. A token female presence, not given any input or voice. The head pastor had to say, maybe that's the halo you identified. She was alone, unaccompanied and unsupported. Okay, she says it felt like an interrogation, as you've all highlighted there. She says, I was 15 or 16 at the time when I disclosed, but I was made to feel like a very small, powerless child. And then she says, I was the accused. How does that work? I guess Jamie and I like using this picture because it tends to do a lot more talking than the words we need to say. They say a picture speaks 1,000 words. To indicate what isn't the right way to respond when somebody is coming forward to disclose unpleasant things they've gone through within our spaces, at the hands of people that we're put into roles of trust. and care over our children and vulnerable adults. So it's an indicator of what we should not be doing, and so and where we have to do better as a church. And Jamie will explain a bit of the process in terms of how these things are managed, but it's important that we try and move away from anyone who has been harmed in our spaces made to feel in the fashion, because the impacts of abuse on that person, that child, boy or girl or whatever it is are often lifelong. People who've been harmed in this way don't rarely get to become the potential that God has for them because of the what that does to them physically, psychologically, in terms of their relationships, in life in general, becomes a challenge, and it might never get to where it needs to get, but they suffer these things for a long time. So I guess it was just for us to show you from a survivor's perspective how things can look on their side of the table. Now, Pastor, I've got another video now, if it works. Excuse my slides, they've gone off. How to receive a disclosure, just to give you an idea.
It's never easy when a young person discloses abuse. There are probably 1,000 things going through your head, from trying to remember your organisation's safeguarding procedure, to asking the right questions. Should you be asking questions at all? But no matter how anxious you're feeling, it's worth remembering that most young people only choose to talk to someone they really trust. So chances are you're already doing something right. Whatever the situation, here are a few simple things you can do to create a safe space for a better conversation. Help them open up. For some children, talking about abuse can be scary. You need to show them that you care and that you are listening to what they say. This can be as simple as changing your body language, and avoid anything that can make you seem distracted or distant. Keep your focus on them. They're the most important thing right now. Slow down and take your time. This chat might only be a small part of the disclosure. They could just be testing the water, so let them go at their own pace. Even if the gaps in the conversation feel awkward to you, it's their story. Give them time to tell it. Reflect back and show you understand by simply going through what they've told you already. If possible, use their language. The specific words they use are an important part of their narrative. And although it's easy to jump to conclusions, or even solutions, right now they just need to feel listened to. You can practice these techniques whenever someone's telling you a story, helping them to open up, slowing things down, and reflecting back in everyday conversations won't just make you a better listener, but will also prepare you for when a disclosure does happen. It could change a young person's life.
Now, that's helpful if you have some skills in this area. It's a very specific area of work. And we know that a lot of us, I don't have that training, and you might not have that training. And so I think the key element is to listen and reassure that person that they've been heard, that they've done the right thing, that they have not done anything wrong. And then for you guys, who this is not your day-to-day business, is to refer them to the right people. And that's what we talked about, the teams in AdSafe. We have survivor services that can support, and those out-of-hours crisis service numbers that also deal with survivors a lot. I think we don't want to overload you with things, because this is a heavy piece of work to do. And so, although some people might be able to tackle some of this and still handle it in the right way, for those who are not, it's important to know that really all it is reassuring and referring them to the right support that is there. Do you understand that? We're also concerned about your mental health, because the details of these things are unpleasant, and you don't need to know all of them. They just need to tell you that this has happened, and maybe not the whole of the detail. You don't need to question them about it, but then that means you still have information that needs to be addressed in the appropriate manner to support that person. With adults, it's a little bit different in the sense, of course, adults can still determine whether they want it to be reported to the police or whatever else. But with kids, because they're under 18, we have a duty. So if a child asks you not to report that, you need to say to them that, thank you for telling me, thank you for trusting me, I believe you, and you've done the right thing, but I do need to refer this to someone who's more qualified to help you in this space. So we need to be transparent about that, because you don't want to say, I'm not going to tell anyone, of course, then you have to, because then you breach that trust. I think it's having that clarified at the beginning, because it's not ideal to say to a child, you're not going to tell anyone, because now you have information that there could be a risk, and that needs to be addressed. So the age is really important, yes. Has the recording started again? I don't know. Pastor Vitali, are you there? And my slides have gone. Good, pick up. Pastor, who's the other man? I don't know his name. Oh, here we go, he's coming. I don't know how they're trying to do this.
So does the procedure follow the same for, let's say, a child discloses something to you maybe 3 or 4 years later to when something actually happened?
Yeah.
So the protocol is the same as to how you deal with that?
So you mean the reassuring part and...
Yeah.
Jamie, do you want to take it? Doesn't matter.
How do you deal with that when somebody comes to you and something happens, say 3 or 4 years
Yeah.
When to report to where?
Yeah.
and didn't disclose something at the time, but now comes out and discloses something? So how does that change?
Yeah, so the risk has just been identified, that's the same. So it's new to you, and that's often the case as well. If that person, so there's a few things, and we sort of might readdress it later, but
Yeah.
I will say this. If a child is disclosing something that's a risk that they're in their home, for instance, and they're going to go back into that environment, if they're still a child, then you need to report that immediately, so they're not going back into that environment without the proper assessment. So that means police, oranga tamariki, and if that person, say it happened when they were a child, but now they're an adult, then they have a bit more agency about that. But you know, look, we would recommend that in all these cases, contact us, because we can then help with the support avenues and managing risk and all of that. So that's crucial. But I'm going to look at what do we do from this point. Oh, we're going to do it now. There you go. Look at that. Excellent segue. So basically, we've got a disclosure. We want that person to be supported, of course. But now there's a risk, and a person has been identified that has a safeguarding or a child protection risk. So what do we do as a church? And so the Royal Commission that had some recommendations. We don't need to read all of this, but in a nutshell, they're catching up to where the Seventh-day Adventist Church child protection policies are. And because the policies are Australia and New Zealand, so you guys are ahead of all the other denominations when they have to pick all this stuff up. And I know for a fact from speaking with some administrators that when they've had contact with other denominations, they're like, how are we going to do all this? And they said, well, we've got an organisation, AdSafe, that helps us with this stuff. And they were like, what? You know, like they're like, so you guys are already doing this stuff. But here's what the government has caught up with. And they're saying, so people in religious ministry that have been found, and it says here, on the balance of probabilities, so I'll explain that in a minute, to have committed abuse or neglecting care, or who is convicted of a related offence, should be permanently removed from ministry. So the standard of proof, we'll ignore that last part. So basically, that's just some jargon that says that it should be consistent and proportionate, and we agree with that. So what this means is that if an allegation is found about someone in religious ministry, now that could mean not just pastors, but also people that are engaged for religious services in your church. And the balance of probabilities, so does anyone ever watch movies about law and, you know, like there's like jury sort of thrillers and stuff like that. So they have this thing you might have heard about, it's called beyond a reasonable doubt. So that means that a court, when someone has made an allegation and the court, it's a criminal matter, the court will try to see if they can prove guilt, not innocence. And this is important. So a court will try and prove beyond a reasonable doubt. That means there's no doubt, the jury has said no, that we believe, you know, without any doubt that this person committed this crime. And the reason the standard is so high is because the consequences are also equally high. They can have their liberties taken away, they can go to jail, all of these things. Now, the reason this is so serious is they're saying if somebody has committed a crime against a child, and remember when we looked at the grooming, often in a church setting, religious language is abused as well, and that power has been abused to access children. And so they're saying that someone that has that authority and that influence, they should never have that authority and influence again to be re-abused and more children be harmed. So now, that's the convicted of an offence beyond a reasonable doubt. But what happens is, in court, it's very hard to prove this. It's something like 6% of cases go through from a charge to a conviction, right? So that means 9 out of 10 people that have been charged for a child-related offence don't get convicted. Now, here's the question I like to ask people. Will you let that person babysit your kids? So it's a really high risk, right? Now, they haven't been convicted, but the court hasn't said that means you're innocent. They've said you're not. We can't prove that you're guilty, and because of the way evidence works, it's really hard to get that conviction. So for the same reason, you'd be careful to say, hey, look, I don't know if I want, trust this person to babysit my kids. We're saying, hey, do we want them to have influence and authority over our kids in church as well? And so if it's gone through court and the court says, look, we couldn't convict here, there's still that question. And so as a church, and now in Australia, a lot of our legislation says, well, you still have an allegation and there's a risk that's been identified. So what do you say happened? So we would get an investigator to look at this and say, and it's called the balance of probabilities. And it's a lower standard. It's the civil standard of proof. And it's not trying to convict someone for penalties or punishment. It's trying to say, well, what's the risk here? Is it likely that it happened or less, or is it more likely that it didn't happen? And so that's what a civil stand, that's what the balance of probabilities is. So here it's saying if a minister, if it's more likely that they did commit that offence, then the risk is too high to put that person in charge with children. And as Pastor Vitali was saying before, there's a number of matters it gets into. We couldn't go into everything here, but especially when it comes to working with kids, some things are permanent. You know, we just say, look, the risk is too high, and we need to change that. So the Royal Commission also says that people should be made aware that, or it should be clear that person does not have religious authority anymore. So this means, like, if someone is stood down because there's a concern there, everybody else still sees that person as a religious leader. So in New Zealand, they're saying, well, we need to make sure that people are clear there. Now, that doesn't mean we have to tell everyone what's happened, and I think I actually would refrain from that, because we believe in privacy and confidentiality, especially when we're talking about these kinds of offences, because it also reveals information about victims. You know, if you say, oh, well, there's a crime, well, who did he offend against? And then their privacy needs to be protected as well. Look, in some cases, and there's been some notable cases that have had media attention as well, where it's very clear that, look, we say, look, this person is no longer in ministry. So now, if a faith-based organisation becomes aware that someone who has a substantiated abuse complaint or has been convicted, we need to assess that risk and that they pose, and we need to take appropriate measures to manage that risk. And so this is my job. So how do we do this? So somebody has disclosed something, and we've learnt that, and it's good for you guys to understand how this works, although usually this will happen with the pastor, and with maybe some elders will be aware and manage that. It's not something that's dealt with by the board or everyone, but it's good to know how it works. And so what happens is, say we have an allegation. So someone has made a disclosure to you, but it's not tested. You don't have a finding. You don't know if that person is the court hasn't proved if they're guilty. There hasn't been an investigation. We don't know if it's substantiated, but a risk has been identified. Now, it's very counterintuitive. So people feel, I think their first gut instinct is to say, well, I'm going to go and talk to that person. She said that you did this. What do you say? Right? Now, what's happened in that case is you've just told the person that an allegation is being made about that this person has said that you did that. So when the police get to that, this person's had an opportunity to interfere with that whole process. And they've gone to that person and said, if you say anything more, I could threaten violence or all sorts of things. And then that person says, oh, look, actually, I take it back. It didn't happen. So that means that the avenues of criminal justice have been interfered with. That victim doesn't get heard. And that question hangs over that person's head now, because now we go, well, did they? Didn't they? And it hasn't gone through a process to where we find an answer to that. So we have to be very careful about what we do with that information. And so we have a way, it's not perfect, but what do we do? Now, that means that sometimes someone has an allegation about them and they don't know about it yet. So the police have been notified, the police are doing their investigation, and you can actually, by interfering with a police investigation, you could also be criminally negligent. So we have to be really careful here. And so we would tell the pastor, because there's still a risk that's been identified. And we call this increased vigilance.
It's never easy when a young person discloses.
Wrong one. Increased vigilance. So what this means is we would have the pastor have extra, just be extra careful around this person. But essentially, most of this can be dealt with the policies. So you make sure extra sure that the policies are being followed. There's always 2 adults with children, right? And when it comes to this person, you just make extra sure that that person is not alone with children. This is protecting them, because right now a question's been raised, right? We're not saying we have an opinion about that, but we do say that there's a risk that's been identified. So it protects them. Because if they are moving away with children into dark corners where no one can see them, well, then actually, this could be a real concern. So we need to make sure that that's not happening, and we have 1 or 2 people, because we can't let many people know about it as well. There's strict confidentiality here, but they manage that situation, and we give them some advice about how to do that. It's mainly through following the policies, making sure the policies are extra vigilant about those policies. So we call it increased vigilance. But then that person, the police finally go, okay, they approach that person and they say, and they've decided they're going to lay charges. So that means that person is now aware of that allegation. The police have determined that that's the right time to do it. And then we go, well, is this appropriate? Now, there's a number of things we have to think about. if the victim is at the same church and the offender is at that church, that's not fair for the victim that the offender is there with them each Sabbath. They've just been charged for a criminal offence. Now, that doesn't mean it's been determined yet, but we want to protect that victim, because right now, and often the police will put in extra provisions so that person shouldn't be in the same area as them. But we also, if the victim doesn't attend that church, we will make an agreement with that. Now, we've done a risk assessment and we've worked out, okay, is this risk manageable? Is this risk low? And often this will come into place when it is a historic matter. Something current, there's extra risks involved, but say we know that someone has a criminal history for a sexual offence against a child, we'll make a plan with that person. It's with the pastor. The elders are usually made aware of it, and they hold that person accountable to these conditions. But in a nutshell, it limits their access to children. They can't be contacting children in church in any way whatsoever. They can, if we've deemed the risk is manageable, they can come to church. They can be where everyone is, but they shouldn't be sitting with children or approaching children. The pastor and some elders, they're making sure that that's happening. And also, just like the Royal Commission said, there's roles that they can't be taking anymore. They can't be nominated for roles that come with spiritual authority, that give them access and influence over children. And so we would manage that. Now, if they'd already been convicted, something like this would stay in place indefinitely, because it means that, hey, there's limitation. We've got to make sure that you're not approaching children. There's a risk here. We don't know that they're going to or not going to, but because we don't know, we have to make sure that we're not giving them access. And it's often because, now, I'll say this, because when it comes to sexual offenders against children, we often get this view, and that means they're a pedophile, right? We hear this phrase a lot, but actually, just because this might be a bit of a shock to you, just because somebody has offended against a child doesn't mean they actually have a sexual interest in children. It means that there was an opportunity that happened, and most cases are in this avenue. This happens with families, where it's happening in families where a father or mother, it can happen, have abused their child. It doesn't mean that they're interested in that child. It's about some severe disconnect from reality and illicit needs being met. And so it doesn't mean that that person is interested in children. But we will manage that and make sure that that person is not in roles that can give them access, because there's just too many questions. We can't do that. Now, in some cases, we go, you know what? This person has been convicted for having multiple offences against multiple children, and it's a very high risk. And we have different risk assessments that we can use to determine that, but we say, you know what? This risk is too high, and in that case, we might have to exclude that person. We might say, you know what, we can't expose our church to this risk because that person may be a pedophile. They may actually be interested in children, and they may actually be predators in that sense. They're actively looking for opportunities to offend against children. But we would still recommend, if the church loves this person and they can still provide spiritual support, but in a different context, at home or whatever. The other thing here is people will often think that some of these processes are punishment, especially where someone was convicted many years ago. But we have to look, this isn't punishment. The only punishment that is in the hands of you as church members, disfellowship and censure. That's how churches deal with discipline in churches. We're not offering punitive approaches, but sometimes risk management means restrictions on what they can do to manage risk, but it's not punishment. So often people say, well, that person already went to jail, they've already done their time. It's like, this isn't doing time and this isn't a punishment. This isn't a punitive response, But this is so that they can attend safely. If it's manageable, this is to include them. They can attend safely, and it's managed and monitored. And we'll do some extra training with those elders to make sure they understand how to manage that. So that's how we deal with risk management in the church. And there's a lot more to it. There's a lot of steps, but this is essentially our key ways of doing that. Yeah, and we talked about this before. When that disclosure happens, you want to. The first thing we need to do now, if we hear about these things, it's always through the police. You report to the police, Oranga Tamariki, tell your pastor, unless it's about your pastor or about if it's a spiritual leader, and the allegation is about them. Obviously, they shouldn't know. But AdSafe, because we will walk you through all of this stuff, make sure that and we'll give you that guidance about how to manage this so that it gets a fair hearing, that the victim can be heard fairly, that the offender is treated fairly, because it's a fair process and it manages all of those needs.
All right. I know that's a bit heavy, but we've had to add that in because people don't understand that, and then there's questions about, well, how do we deal with offenders? And so we've put that in to give you some context. The depth of it is probably beyond your role, but it's at least a good idea for you to have that understanding. I hope that helped.
It's on our website as well.
Yeah, and he does a lot more work than just the summaries given you. I'm led to believe. Okay, so now we're on the home stretch. How excited are you about that? We have a scenario that I would like you to help me with, and then we'll wrap up. Is that all right? I'm sorry, but we're slightly over time, but this is a really important one. You're gonna see everything we've talked about so far might help you here. Hint, hint. Okay? All right, so I'm going to give you some characters in our scenario here. We have Mark, who is a man in his early 40s. It could be Mary, a woman in her early 40s. So that's either way it can work. New to the congregation, you have Anna, who's oversees the youth group and who's very busy and overstretched. Bless them, youth directors are usually very stretched. Josh, a 13-year-old boy who attends youth group regularly, and Josh's mother, a single parent grateful for church support. Everyone good? These are our characters in this discussion. All right, let's go. Tell me when you're not okay with what I'm telling you here. So, I haven't told you anything yet. Hold on. So Mark begins attending church regularly and is very helpful and friendly. We're good with that, right? Right, amen. You see, we like that, don't we, Junior? He volunteers quickly for setup and cleanup, publicly supports church values and leadership, and offers practical help, for example, IT, lifting things and fixing things. Well, yes, he helps to, moving chairs if we have to. He's just being practical and helping around. Are we good with this? Not humans, lifting things. All right? All right, let's see how we go. So, Mark offers to help with youth group when a leader calls in sick. So Anna must have got sick or someone else, and he said, hey, I can help with that. He's praised for stepping up. He starts attending youth activities regularly and becomes a familiar and trusted adult to young people. Yes. It doesn't seem like it because it suggests that he's popping in when somebody calls in sick. Are we okay with that? Church manual says you're not letting this go. You're absolutely right. That is a concern. But what else? But then he would have a role, wouldn't he? Have we given Mark a role yet? We're not messing about in this church. Yes, so what have we told you about that hasn't happened yet? All the stuff we've been talking about all night, about the safeguarding framework and the requirements for those in roles. None of that's happened, right? So he had an opportunity, right? Somebody called in sick and he stepped up. And no one did process. Right? And now, what's that last bullet point there? Yeah. And now, and additionally, he's attending youth activities regularly now. Okay. Then it says, Mark notices Josh, that 13-year-old boy we talked about. He's quieter than other kids, stays behind after sessions, mentions difficulties at home. Mum is Anna. Is it Anna? Mum is a single parent. Mark begins to give Josh extra attention, praises him more than others, offers emotional support framed as mentoring. What is this sounding like, or not? Grooming. Do you see how subtle this can be? How easily someone who's not involved in a role suddenly is part of a role, and it's just carried on as if it's everyday business. Yeah? Any issues here besides all that? It's pretty bit textbook grooming, isn't it, to a degree, from some angles, right? Okay, it continues. Mark starts to create opportunities to be alone with Josh. He offers lifts home after youth group, suggests meeting early to set up, communicates directly with Josh via social media. He tells Josh that Josh is very mature for his age. Mark understands Josh better than others, and some things are better kept private. It's all going wrong now, has it? It's all on fire, right? What you don't think it's all on fire? What's right about this? Yeah, let's start with that question. Why do you think that? It's good, right? Okay. So if Mark had gone through the process of a youth director, all those things were talked about, including a code of conduct. There's been a conversation, right? He would have had to read a code of conduct. What behaviors in this are not allowed by a code of conduct? Are not okay? Yes. Yep. Yep. Alone with a child that's not your own. So that's the 2 adult role is breached right there. Yep. Anything else?
Stranger danger.
Stranger danger. Yep, so we're getting into secrecy mode. It's just between you and I. Okay. Okay. So Junior, we try to explain that part of setting boundaries as a church and how we all engage to ensure that we're all safe is ensuring that we name the behaviors that are not okay. It's not okay for an adult to be alone with a child that is not their own in secluded and isolated places, is what we're saying.
Yeah, it protects the adult.
It protects the adult, it protects the child.
Because, a child sometimes might misunderstand what's happening, and then they make an allegation, and then you get in trouble. And it's like, and you might be innocent, but there's misunderstanding. And if you are with someone else and everything's transparent, it protects you. And we want to protect everyone, not just the children is the key here, but we want to protect everyone from these circumstances that can cause trouble for everyone.
Are we all clear on that? And the code of conduct is usually helpful when people aren't clear on. We talk about what boundaries are okay or not. If you're doing a role as part of where are we? What church are we at? Royal Oak Pathfinder Club. You communicate via, I suppose, a WhatsApp group with all the parents and maybe the kids if they're a certain age. But why would you need to then contact with my son outside of that portal? Yeah, it's about maintaining boundaries and removing and we talked about grooming leading to isolating a child so that things can then happen in private where no one else can oversight and protect that child. It's removing those challenges to protect everyone involved in a thing. And
another layer of this is that the children that get used to being able to go in cars with people without being, with other people, then they feel that that's normal, and then the wrong person asks them to do it, and they've become comfortable with that, and then all of a sudden, we've taught them that we need them to know. Oh, you know what? I need to make sure that it's safe as well.
Yeah. All right. Let's see what else happens, unless it's the end of it. Mark gradually shares his personal problems with Josh, uses mild physical contact framed as encouragement, pushes boundaries slowly so they feel normal. And with Josh feels special but confused, uncomfortable but unsure how to speak up, and also afraid of getting Mark in trouble. All right, so this is just an example of how something can start off seemingly okay, and indeed it's okay, but because we're not following the safeguarding systems in place to safeguard adults and kids in our environments, people push boundaries or misunderstand the boundaries that have been set. And so we need to ensure that when we put people in roles that give them access to kids, that we clarify those and they understand those expectations of them to safeguard everybody, both the adult and the child. All right? So I hope that has helped to bring all the learnings and the discussions we've had today and to give you some... You have something to say?
This happens all the time. We've done this training where the church said, no way. Is this something that you've taken from our church? We were like, because...
Yes, and these are the things that we need to try and ensure that we do in the right way in our churches.
Yeah. Now, had we go back all the way to the beginning. Go all the way to the beginning.
I think not the introduction.
Next time, had someone said, okay, Mark's helpful and that's great, right? And we go, and he says, look, he's helping and setting up and cleaning up, that's all great. Next one, and then he starts to attend the youth activities regularly.
Stepping in now as a leader.
But he's becoming familiar. We're watching it. And then the next one, he offers to stay behind and he's giving, I think we've skipped one.
Which one? The praise?
No. So where he starts to help out more and takes over when someone's sick.
Yeah.
Right here we go, hey Josh, look, we're really grateful, but did you know that we have these standards and this protects you and it protects our kids because he's outside of our church. We make him familiar. We say, hey, we actually have these steps. If you wanted to do that, that's great. What we can do is when we can consider this and we can walk you through those steps if it's appropriate. And then all of a sudden you've diverted that whole event from happening just by sticking with the policies. There's always 2 adults around. There's he's aware of the code of conduct. Then you can pull him up on that and say, hey, you're communicating directly with Josh on social media. Look, we actually have policies around this and here's why it protects you. And then all of a sudden, all this heartache doesn't happen.
Yeah. All right, well, I hope that was useful. Yeah? I'm going to move a little bit faster. We've done most of that in the discussion. And there's a hand up. Yes, please.
Just curious, someone's involved in 2 different churches, goes to verification, has a membership with one. How does that work for participating in the second church where my membership isn't?
Well, yeah, that's where
the 2 talk to each other.
That's where you got to talk to each other, get the reference checks, all of those. Like if the church's diligence would be that they may know you, but they should do a double check because maybe there's stuff that's the board's aware of that they can make the pastor aware in this setting. Also the waiting periods in the manual they should really apply, which is 6 months for new to the role, new to church.
Non-member.
So there is a period where they shouldn't just be immediately active in roles. And then look, even while membership transfer is happening, then there's still that waiting period, and then they can look through that.
I think there's an element of common sense in how the church deal with it, but it's just the fact that they actually think about it. And okay, if there's a challenge here, what's the alternative to address it? There's always more than, in most cases, ways around, not around, but a way to address it in an alternative fashion, but still get the same result and clarification for you to make those calls about putting people in those roles.
And sometimes, look, real world example, a person that we had very serious concerns about that we couldn't address. There's this increased vigilance plan in place, and we were working with certain people to waiting on them. And then that person disappeared, and they showed up in another church, and that other church, just because this person was known in the region, they made him a youth leader. And there's no waiting, no checks. They just needed someone to help out. And then then that church ended up becoming audited by the people that manage that, the guardians and people that look, the legislative bodies that manage that. And then that church got audited. Then they look and say, hey, what else have you missed here? And then they can get a fine. And that's Australia. You're not there yet. But the fact is that this person was very unsuitable, we had really high concerns about, and they were given a role with youth. So, and it was partly because he was known in the region. People knew who he was, but they didn't know what some people knew because of the need for confidentiality.
Yeah, and process wasn't followed.
Process was not followed, yeah.
All right, so I've got to send you home at some point, right? Did you want to go home or not? So thank you for coming out to hang out with Jamie and I. I hope we haven't, we have overloaded you. That's the truth, hasn't it? But hopefully given you useful information. Pardon?
Some food for thought.
Food for thought, let's call it that.
But also understanding a little bit about, how the child protection policies work, and that you have a bit more confidence as well that churches are moving in a good direction, and they keep these interests in mind.
Yeah, please make sure you've written your names down so I can. Someone's asked for slides. I'll arrange them. I'll have to fix them because the videos you're not going to be able to get them on the slides. So I'll have to attach the link should you want to see them. So I've got to do some minor editing to allow you to still have access to that because the video won't turn up on the slides. Thank you for coming out to hang out with us. I hope that as you engage in your churches and your various ministries, there's things to think about and things to ask. Sometimes we can get bogged down in our day-to-day work and some of this detail is missed, but we can help each other to prioritize safeguarding. It's important to have these conversations with key roles about expectations and give them that empowerment to know what to do and so on, and look at the processes, speak to your kids and your adults, put your notices up so everybody understands this church is hot on this and they want to ensure that this church is safe for kids and adults, and for those who have bad intentions, we would like them to take them elsewhere, but not any other. Anyway, you know what I'm saying, just not to bring it to your space. It would be good, obviously you have an idea now of policy. Policy can be quite heavy. We have checklists and other resources to try and simplify those for you. We even have job descriptions for a lot of the jobs in churches that explain the safeguarding aspect of those roles and so on, just to get people all understanding that this is part of the mission of the church and to operate in a space that is safe for all. If you have any questions, please check in, email us, call us, and we will do our very best to help you with that. And on that note, unless there's more questions, I also have that feedback questionnaire that I talked about. If you do have a moment, give us some feedback, what you might want to know about in the future that you don't think we've covered, etc. So we can look into that next time we come and see you. If there's resources that you would like and you don't know where to find them, or it's an idea for something new, talk to us, and when safeguarding team can get to it, we'll try and get it to it and share it with your pastors, your AdSafe compliance assistants, and your conference leadership. Are we good? Everyone is still, okay. We'll pray, and then anything else you want? Pastor, you can pray for us. We might as well give him a job. Like he hasn't been working hard.
He plays a vital role.
He's been working hard tonight with the IT.
We actually have Pastor Ronald with us from Auckland International Church, so probably I'll give him the right to pray the end. Thank you, Pastor.
Okay. Shall we pray? Our most gracious, kind Heavenly Father, we come before your presence this evening, oh Lord. We'd like to say thank you for this time to learn AdSafe, Heavenly Father, and how can we more active in our churches to protect our young people and our children, Heavenly Father. Lord, please help us. And Lord, help us to learn more and help us to create a safe community in our churches, Heavenly Father. And as we go home, oh Lord, we would like to ask you to please keep us safe in thy hand. Please send your holy and just words over us. Thank you, Lord, for everything you have done for us. Thank you for hearing our prayer. Because you ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everybody. And I hope you have a good evening. What's left of it anyway. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.